Hi, Bryn Stroyke with Stroyke Properties at Bayside, here today to talk about the recent NAR lawsuit. For anyone who has had personal proximity to a story, it's always enlightening to see how misleading and sometimes outright wrong the headlines can be. The recent settlement of the lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors has birthed 1,000 such headlines, and I've yet to see one that is accurate. As a qualifier, it's important to know that while the scope of this lawsuit is national, it was really based in Missouri. Let's just say we in California do things a little differently than they do in Missouri. With that said, the most common and glaring inaccuracy I have seen is that this lawsuit is about commissions being too high and the result are going to be slash commissions. That's entirely inaccurate. There's nothing at all in the settlement about slashing commissions. This lawsuit has been about two primary things. One was decoupling the listing side commission from the buyer side commission. And number two, creating transparency in the process for the buyer. I should say in 30 plus years of doing this as just a qualifier, I've never worked with a buyer or seller where I could not refer them to 100 agents that would work at highly discounted rates. There's nothing new about discount brokerages, and agents that'll work for discounted rates are literally everywhere. So with that said, let's jump in. The price fixing part of this comes down to this. If you told me, Bryn, I want you to list my home and I don't want to offer anything to a broker representing a buyer, what I would tell you is that the MLS would not allow us to do that. We don't have the flexibility to offer zero. There are three major changes coming. One I would categorize as a good change, one I think is a great change, and one I think candidly is dumb. So let's start with the good. Sellers now will have the flexibility of offering whatever they want to an outside agent, including zero. That's the new part. We've always been able to offer $1, 5%, 3%, 2.5%, 1%. We have the ability to offer zero now. That's really not a huge change. Why is it good? Well, the MLS should not dictate to sellers how you want to sell your home. If we want to offer zero, we should have the flexibility to do it. In the vast majority of circumstances, I don't think it's in a seller's best interest to not offer buyers, agents compensation, but that's a separate issue. It's separate and apart from whether we should be allowed to do it. We should be allowed to do it. So I think that's good. So the second change is every buyer is going to be required to sign a buyer's representation agreement where the buyer agrees to compensate their agent if the seller refuses to do so. I think it's a great change. About 50% of the transactions in the country are done by part-time agents who will do one or two transactions a year. They have heavy splits with their brokerage houses, and frankly, it's where a lot of the profit in these brokerage houses come from. Those agents who I would say are less professional, typically part-time agents, are going to have a tougher time presenting their value now that buyer's representation agreements are going to be required, and that's going to put pressure on larger boxes on their bottom line because these types of agents are a big part of their profit. The third change, which is a one that I would say is dumb, is that the amount of commission a seller is offering is now going to be invisible on the MLS. Why is it dumb? Well, it's dumb because it's relevant information. Whether a buyer is paying for the commission or the seller is offering a commission, it's relevant to a buyer to know that. In the high end, in a market like Manhattan, Hermosa Beach, it's really not going to have much of an impact. But in markets with lower priced properties where buyers have limited cash resources for down payment, knowing whether they have to come out of pocket to pay an agent is going to significantly impact which houses they focus on. There's a certain irony in a lawsuit about a lack of transparency that they introduce a rule that really is a lack of transparency. And the funny thing about it is it's not going to be illegal to advertise what you're offering. It's not going to be illegal to put it on a website. It's not going to be illegal to put it on a brochure. You can put it anywhere but on the MLS. So that's kind of a silly rule, and I think that it will change over time because it doesn't make any sense. The first two changes that are coming, the decoupling of the listing commission from the buyer's agent commission and buyer's representation agreements, have been around for 5 or 6 years up in the Northwest in Washington and Oregon, and it's been positive for the brokerage business, for the industry. It's also been positive for consumers, and commission rates have been largely unchanged in that marketplace where these changes have taken place. place. And I think that's probably the best guide of where things are going to be going as the rest of the country adopts those rules. It's notable that Redfin, as an example of a discount brokerage, has been around for 15 years and has 0.02 market share. There's a reason for that. Buyers and sellers have always placed a significant value on representation on what in many cases is the most significant purchase of their financial lives. When MLS information 20 years ago went from being proprietary to brokers in the MLS to being shared with the public, where now everybody's walking around with the MLS on their phone, the headlines all trumpeted that it was going to be the end of buyer representation. People don't need buyer brokers if they could get the information themselves. And that was actually, I thought, an intuitive take. And what was interesting is that the opposite happened. The number of buyers who worked with buyers agents before that happened versus after, it went up dramatically after this. There was so much information. Buyers felt the need in a far greater percentage to have quality buyer representation. So to wrap this all up, this is much more about rearranging deck chairs than the sea change it's been billed as. Anyway, if you have further questions, give me a shout, email, text. Happy to chat with you about this or any other real estate questions you may have.